welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs. In I would say maybe a snow day, an ice day. I'm iced in, working from home today, but I wanted to make y'all another video because there is some Texans coaching news and NFL news that impacts your Houston Texans. And then also, I know a lot of us watched those championship games, the AFC and NFC championship games yesterday. I'm going to break those down and tell you why I'm a little upset after watching those games. And, some of y'all might know some of the reasons why. Some of you might know all the reasons why. But I'm going to tell you why yesterday's games upset me so much as a Texans fan watching not only the AFC, but also the NFC championship game. Because there's a couple things from that game that a little upsetting whenever you go back and look at the history of this Texans organization, and especially this offseason, some of the moves that they made. Before I do, I want to know from y'all, do you think the Texans would have beat that Broncos team yesterday? I know it's easy to be like, oh yeah, of course, we would have beaten that team as well, this, that, and the other. I mean, who knows with how CJ Stroud was playing, especially in the cold, that second half in Denver, it was a snowstorm up there at Mile High. Let me know, though. Give me your thoughts. If the Texans were to have beaten the Patriots, do you think they would have beaten the Broncos in that AFC championship game? And, for more updates around this team, for everything going on around the Houston Texans, make sure you hit that sub button. Turn on your notifications as well. If you're already subbed, I'm going to be breaking down a ton of stuff around free agency, the draft this offseason. So make sure hit that noti bell and be notified when I drop a new video. All right, first, let's talk about the coaching news that impacts the Houston Texans and some Texans coaches that might be on the move elsewhere. First, let's talk about Jerrod Johnson. He's interviewing for the Eagles offensive coordinator job. And it's kind of funny. The Eagles have had a very difficult time at filling that position. You would think that, an OC job that got, multiple guys hired in the past. Kellen Moore got a head coach job from being that OC. And then you go, Brian Johnson obviously didn't get a head coaching job. But this, I would think it's an attractive position. You get to work with Saquon Barkley, this offensive line that the Eagles have. They have a really good O-line coach. Jalen Hurts, for all the mess that people talk about him, I still think is a, top 10 quarterback in the NFL. But time after time, people are, declining to work there, right? Bobby Slowick chose to, take the Dolphins job, which they also interviewed Jerrod Johnson. He chose that job over the Eagles job. Brian Daboll said no thank you. Mike McDaniel said no thank you. Multiple OCs, even the Bears passing game coordinator, Declan Doyle, he said no thank you to the Philadelphia Eagles OC job. So could it be Jerrod Johnson's job, and I would say a really good opportunity for him as a young coach in the NFL, a young QB coach, to take that next step? And, it's a huge risk or reward. I feel like if you're the Eagles OC, you either get hired to be a head coach or you're a one and done and the whole city of Philadelphia hates you. So it's really interesting to see, nobody really wanting this Eagles offensive coordinator job, and then insert Jerrod Johnson, who's getting an interview with Philadelphia to fill that position. Now, it's not the only job that he could be interested in or he could be, a candidate for. There's more head coaching vacancies to come this week. The Raiders, the Bills, the Browns, the Cardinals all need to fill their head coaching vacancies. And there's still multiple teams that are looking for an OC, right? The Giants, depending on what happens with Todd Monken, might need an OC. The Titans, they said they like Brian Daboll and he's probably going to be their guy, but will he get another head coaching opportunity elsewhere, right? Like, there's multiple different spots that could still be available for Jerrod Johnson to go be an OC elsewhere. And I talked about it in a video earlier this week. I definitely see a natural split between the Texans and Jerrod Johnson this offseason, because if you're going to run it back with CJ Stroud, Nick Caley, most of those same guys, it's going to be tough. That's funny. It's going to be tough, to run back the entire Texans offensive coaching staff. So I think for a guy like Jerrod Johnson, he should definitely look at this opportunity with the Philadelphia Eagles and be like, maybe this is a good time to split, because, I don't know if the Texans are thrilled to bring him back this next season, or if they're looking for a change at, the QB coach position, because it's a very difficult decision to make, to be in if you're Jerrod Johnson, because are you basically going to stake your future on CJ Stroud turning it around this season? Because as the QB coach, that's the one area that everybody's going to look at. Can he improve CJ Stroud and get him to play better this season, since the Texans are more than likely going to run it back with Stroud? I would take my chances with the Philadelphia Eagles and go take that position. Obviously, it's a step up. You get an OC job rather than a QB coach job. He'll be able to call the plays there in Philadelphia. Very, very interesting position for Jerrod Johnson. The other coach that we got to talk about, and this one I think is more detrimental to the Texans rather than Jerrod Johnson. It's Dino Vasso, the DB coach for the Houston Texans. He is interviewing for the Titans defensive coordinator job. And listen, it would suck to lose Vasso, as just a coach on this Texans coaching staff. Players, other coaches, everything that I've read about him says that he is an amazing defensive back coach. And, he does something every year where he invites all the defensive backs, all the, secondary to his house for a team bonding exercise. And a lot of the guys in this locker room really, really like him as one of the position coaches. And, he's credited for developing a lot of those guys in the secondary. Kamari Lassiter, Derek Stingley, Pitre, like a lot of those guys really credit Dino for really helping them, take that next step and, become a professional in this league. And I think, just like I said with Jerrod Johnson, as, more head coaching vacancies fill up, he could get other opportunities as well with the Raiders, with the Bills, the Browns, the Cardinals. And the one thing around that, it would be a step up, obviously, right? He gets the DC job rather than just a defensive backs coach. But Robert Saleh, he is a defensive-minded head coach, so I don't know if he would necessarily call the plays. But going from a D'Amico Ryans to a Robert Saleh would make a lot of sense for him, right? Like, I think they're very similar coaches. They come from the same coaching tree, both being defensive coordinators under Kyle Shanahan with the San Francisco 49ers. And I think this would be a good opportunity for him to kind of prove himself as well and take that next step forward. And, he doesn't necessarily need to call plays, can just be kind of in that same role, but get a promotion with the Tennessee Titans. I could foresee the Titans hiring him, one, to weaken a division rival. That's always a plus. We saw the Cowboys do that with the Philadelphia Eagles. They hired their, DB coach to be their new defensive coordinator. But two, a well-respected up-and-coming young coach in the NFL. And I know every single team in the NFL is looking for those guys. And, definitely for Dino, this could be a really good opportunity for him. That's another Texans coach that we got to look out for jumping ship this offseason. Now, I'm going to break down why the AFC and NFC championship games were a tough watch for me. And I know they were a tough watch for a lot of Texans fans out there. But, that those games, that did help us decide one thing, the big game. And that leads us to our sponsor, Prize Picks. Got to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. The big game, it's almost here. And there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it feels good to be right. And since the big game, it's right around the corner, that means it's your last chance to get in on the football action this season. So close out the season right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. And we know the big game, it comes with a lot of fun projections and a lot of fun times playing daily fantasy. And I think this is the perfect opportunity if you haven't gotten started to get started today. It's available in all 50 states. It's super simple. All you got to do is choose at least 2 player stats and go more or less on them. If you get your picks right, you can cash in on the big game. So like I said, download the Prize Picks app today. Use that code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. It's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. And a word to the wise, Prize Picks will definitely be giving you some discounts, definitely be doing a ton of promotions for the big game. So like I said, get started today, get that free money and put in those lineups to win something during that big game. All right, speaking of the big game, let's talk about the games that got us there, right? First, I'm going to obviously, it's the Texans. We're in the AFC. So we're going to start off with the AFC title game. And what really annoyed me during that game, because I did see, Landry Locker put out a couple tweets, a couple different, messages saying that, it kind of sucks that the Patriots, in essence, started their rebuild after the Texans did, and they made it back to the Super Bowl before the Texans had a chance to get there. And it's absolutely heartbreaking because go from the Patriots to the Chiefs dynasty, now it seems like it's, the Patriots are back on top of the AFC, and that absolutely sucks. It absolutely sucks as a Texans fan with the amount of, Patriots guys that we brought in, Nick Caserio, Nick Caley, Cole Popovich, among others, right? Like Jake Andrews, the center. Like it seems like, even going back before this current regime, the Texans have always tried to kind of take away from the Patriots and take some of their stuff away and, kind of build on that, and just does not seem to work. And it sucks also seeing a former Texans coach in Mike Vrabel make it there with the New England Patriots, right? Like he was a part of the Texans coaching staff, and it sucks. It sucks seeing other teams get there where, I don't know whether or not the Texans would have been able to beat the Broncos, especially with that weather. And, I saw a lot of debate online whether or not, it's the weather and, this sucks that this kind of weather, helps decide who's going to make it to the Super Bowl. I agree. And, I'd like to, fight against the allegations that the Texans can't play in cold weather. I mean, they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, but, the one allegation I can't fight is CJ Stroud hasn't played good in the cold this year. And, he played okay up against the Chiefs, but against the Steelers, against the Patriots was horrendous in the cold. And it leads me to this question: do the Texans have to get home field advantage to make it to an AFC Championship game or a Super Bowl? Because I did a little quick math, and in terms of outdoor stadiums that are in cold climate areas, the NFC has 7 teams that have outdoor stadiums in cold climate areas. The AFC has 10 teams that are, have outdoor stadiums in also cold climate areas. And a lot of those teams are some of the best teams in the AFC, right? The Denver Broncos, the Kansas City Chiefs, the New England Patriots, Pittsburgh Steelers, all those, the Buffalo Bills, all those teams have outdoor stadiums and live in places where the weather can be a huge factor. And if you're the Houston Texans, if you're this Texans team, or, a Texans fan out there, I think you got to hit the ground running and try to get that number 1 seed with everything you can, because the Texans, obviously, they play much better at home in the playoffs. We've seen it before. The Texans, they got their first road playoff win this year up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in franchise history. They had never won a road playoff game before. And it's nice to kind of get that weight lifted off your shoulders in that aspect. But if you're a Texans fan moving forward, you'd much rather have that home field advantage going forward, especially with the team in the Houston Texans, knowing you'll get a climate-controlled environment. You won't have to deal with the snow. You won't have to deal with the wind. And it'll truly be whichever team is the best team will leave that field that day, hopefully, as the winner of that game. And like I said, 10 teams in the AFC have outdoor stadiums in the cold. And a lot of those teams are the best teams. And you're looking at the teams that don't have an outdoor stadium and aren't in the cold, like the Miami Dolphins, right? They're not a huge threat to the Texans as of late, right? The Indianapolis Colts have an indoor stadium. Not really a huge, maybe if they change their quarterback situation, but still, like I said, some of the best teams in the AFC have those outdoor stadiums and have cold weather climates. So it was just upsetting to see another game that was decided by weather, but also knowing, like, man, if the Texans were in this game, I don't know what would happen. I think it would still be trouble for this team. So it's making me think next year the Texans really got to go after that, 1 seed, 2 seed to get some home games to maybe get some momentum and a playoff run going next season. And then the NFC title game. What annoyed me in this is the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks, who more than likely is going to get a head coaching job this offseason. Clint Kubiak, he's been rumored to be in for the Bills job and for the Raiders job, possibly the Browns. But it's annoying because we could have gotten him this offseason. He was with the New Orleans Saints. They brought in a new head coach in Kellen Moore. So he was looking for an OC job because obviously Kellen Moore was going to come in and call the plays. The only 2 teams, whenever I look back and went and did my research and kind of saw the teams that were interested in him, the only 2 teams that brought him in for interviews, the Cleveland Browns and the Seattle Seahawks. Why did Caserio not even bring him in? Why did we not entertain getting an experienced OC? Was it a money thing? Like, were they not willing to dole out the money that Clint Kubiak was wanting to get paid as an offensive coordinator? I highly doubt that, because they were interested in Chip Kelly, and he ended up getting the bag from the Las Vegas Raiders to be their OC. So if they were going to talk to Chip Kelly, they were obviously willing to, work in that ballpark money-wise for an offensive coordinator. Was it about relationships? Was it the fact that he's a former Kubiak? And, you had Gary Kubiak. He was with this team. He left and obviously ended up being successful with the Denver Broncos, winning a Super Bowl there. Did it have to do with that relationship there? But I do not get at all why they didn't push harder or go harder to bring in a guy like Clint Kubiak, who is an experienced play caller, has called plays at multiple spots, has some skins on the wall. They decided to go with another first-time play caller in Nick Caley. And it's upsetting, right? Like, I know they like the young up-and-comer guys. They, interviewed Nick Caley. They also interviewed Grant Yudinsky, who has gotten a lot of praise in some head coaching interviews this offseason, the current Jags offensive coordinator. They wanted a young and up-and-coming guy. But when you have a team that's ready to win right now, wouldn't it make more sense to get the more proven guy, the more proven play caller, somebody who can call plays and be in that situation in a Clint Kubiak? And I know it's easy to say, oh, Jeremy, you say that now, but, was Clint Kubiak that much of a hot commodity last offseason? Maybe not. His stock's definitely risen this year with Sam Darnold playing even better this year with the Seattle Seahawks, and, obviously getting to the Super Bowl on the NFC side, that has helped a ton. But I don't get how this Texans team saw Clint Kubiak as an option, a former, Kubiak, his dad, a head coach for the Houston Texans, and we're like, nah, it's okay. We'd rather go with the young up and coming guy. And like I said, I don't know if it's a money thing, a relationship thing, but just watching that Seattle Seahawks offense and how good it looked yesterday up against the Rams, and thinking, dang, I really wonder what this offense this year would have looked like if they brought in a Clint Kubiak instead of a Nick Caley and let him run things for Houston. Would CJ Stroud look a little bit better? Would the running back room and this, O-line look a little bit better? The run game really didn't do that much for the Houston Texans this year. Some huge questions to ask, but I mean, there has to be some, questioning of Caserio, questioning of D'Amico Ryans, of why did you hire Nick Caley to be the offensive coordinator as a first-time play caller? Because everybody wants to, dog on Caley. Everybody wants to say, he's doing a bad job. But this kind of comes with the territory when you're hiring a first-timer as a play caller in the NFL. He's going to go through some bumps and bruises. And this team wasn't really, set to go through those bumps and bruises. They were ready to take the next step. The whole thought process of this offseason was, you made it to the divisional round 2 years in a row. How do we get over that hump? So the fact that you're, that's funny that it keeps on doing that. The fact that, you saw that and were like, oh, well, we're going to take a gamble here. It was a big gamble. And not to say that they totally, flubbed it, but the fact that we're seeing the Seahawks make it to the Super Bowl and their offense look incredible. And I'm sorry, Sam Darnold, he deserves all the credit in the world. He's done really good. But talent-wise, is Sam Darnold that much better than CJ Stroud? I don't really think so. I think, with the right coaching staff, with the right help, with the right scheme around him, Stroud can definitely be just as good as Sam Darnold. You look at Sam Darnold, last year, he had an awful playoff game with the Minnesota Vikings where they lost to the Rams in the wild card round. It was horrendous. And he came back this year and he looked awesome in the playoffs. Why can't CJ Stroud do that? And the fact that the Texans didn't look at Clint Kubiak last offseason, just the more I watched that NFC title game and the more I watched that Seahawks offense thrive, the more upset I got as a Texans fan, being like, should have been us. Should have been I felt watching Clint Kubiak yesterday with the Seahawks was like watching, I don't know, somebody you went to high school with and they're like a super megastar famous and you're like, wow, like I can't believe it's, I don't know, just so many emotions watching that game and seeing Clint Kubiak thrive with the Seahawks and being like, damn, I really wish he was a member of this Texans coaching staff. Now, for more updates around this team and, more around the Houston Texans this offseason, you know where to go. It's right here at Texans Today. You can follow me on all my social media accounts, or make sure to hit that sub button for free Texans content all year long. That's all I got for you on today's show. Wherever you're watching, make sure you're safe out there. I know there's a huge cold front going through all of the United States, so I hope everybody's being safe out there, and hopefully we have a great Texans offseason going into next year. Make sure you hit that sub button and join the road down the way. Free agency, draft, I got you covered with everything here at Texans Today.